Lieutenant Sarah Chen adjusted her flight suit one last time before stepping into the massive hangar of Kepler Station. The alien delegates had been waiting for over an hour, and she could feel their impatience radiating across the vast space, like heat from a fusion reactor. Her boots echoed against the metal flooring as she walked toward the group of towering figures gathered near the observation deck. The Valdrani delegation stood in their typical formation, their crystalline exoskeletons catching the harsh artificial light and throwing rainbow patterns across the hangar walls. Ambassador Kethvar, their lead military advisor, turned his massive head towards Sarah as she approached. His 6 eyes blinked in sequence. A gesture she had learned indicated either boredom or mild contempt. "So this is the pilot Earth sends to demonstrate their newest vessel?" Kethvar's voice came through his translator as a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the floor. "She appears to be barely out of training." Sarah kept her expression neutral despite the heat rising in her cheeks. At 24, she was indeed one of the youngest pilots in the Earth Defense Force, but her record spoke for itself. 2 years of perfect simulation scores, top marks in combat theory, and 0 accidents during her training period. Still, she understood why the aliens might be skeptical. Standing beside Kethvar were representatives from 3 other major galactic powers. The Zarathi delegation consisted of 2 tall, insect-like beings whose compound eyes tracked Sarah's every movement. Their translator devices clicked and buzzed as they communicated among themselves in their native language. The single hegemony representative, a massive bear-like creature covered in thick gray fur, simply stared at Sarah with what she assumed was disinterest. "I appreciate you all taking the time to observe today's demonstration," Sarah said, keeping her voice steady and professional. "The UES Prometheus represents a significant advancement in human engineering capabilities." A chittering sound came from one of the Zorathi, which their translator converted into words. "We have reviewed your species' technical specifications. Your vessels rely on primitive chemical propulsion and basic fusion drives. Our scouts report that your largest battleships are no bigger than our courier vessels." Sarah nodded politely. "That's accurate regarding our existing fleet. The Prometheus represents a new approach to Starship design." Kethvar's mandibles clicked together in what Sarah recognized as their equivalent of laughter. "A new approach? Child, my people have been building starships since before your species learned to make fire. The Valdrani Empire controls 17 star systems precisely because we understand what makes an effective warship: size, firepower, and proven technology." The hegemony representative spoke for the first time, his voice a deep bass that required no translator. "The humans showed promise during the Centauri incident, but that was defensive action against pirates. Building a warship capable of projecting power across multiple star systems requires resources and knowledge your species simply does not possess." Sarah felt the familiar tightness in her stomach that came before every major test or evaluation. These beings represented civilizations that had been spacefaring for thousands of years. Their smallest vessels could glass entire planets, and their technology was so advanced that Earth's scientists were still trying to understand basic principles of their faster-than-light communication systems. But Sarah also knew something they didn't. "If you'll follow me to the observation deck, we can begin the demonstration," she said, gesturing toward the reinforced transparasteel windows that looked out into the vast emptiness of space surrounding the station. The group moved together, their various forms of locomotion creating a strange symphony of sounds. Kethvar's crystalline legs clicked against the deck plating. The Zarathi moved with an almost liquid grace that made no sound at all, and the hegemony representative's heavy footsteps shook the floor with each stride. As they arranged themselves along the observation deck, Sarah activated her comm unit. "Control. This is Lieutenant Chen. Requesting clearance for Prometheus launch sequence." "Clearance granted, Lieutenant. All stations report ready. Good luck out there." Sarah smiled at the genuine warmth in the controller's voice. The entire human delegation had been working toward this moment for months. If the demonstration went well, it could open doors to technology exchanges and defensive pacts that would secure humanity's place among the galactic powers. If it went poorly, Earth might find itself relegated to the status of a minor colony world, dependent on alien protection and technology. "Prometheus control. This is Lieutenant Chen. Beginning approach to Hangar Bay 7. Through the observation windows, a small shape became visible in the distance. At first, it was nothing more than a bright point of light against the star field. But as it grew closer, the alien delegates began to shift uncomfortably. "That cannot be the vessel," Kethvar said, his voice carrying a note of confusion. "It's barely large enough to hold a single occupant." Sarah watched as the Prometheus drew closer to the station. To alien eyes, it would indeed look like nothing more than an oversized fighter craft. The hull was sleek and compact, maybe 40 meters from nose to tail, with minimal external armaments visible. No massive gun turrets, no obvious shield generators, no imposing armor plating. "Your records indicated this was to be a demonstration of a capital ship," the Zorathi representative said, their translator struggling with what Sarah assumed was agitation. "This appears to be a personal transport at best. The Prometheus is indeed a capital ship," Sarah replied calmly. "Human ship classifications are based on capability, rather than size." The hegemony representative made a sound that might have been a snort. "No vessel that small could carry enough fuel for interstellar travel, let alone the power systems necessary for effective weapons and shields. Your demonstration appears to be an exercise in misdirection." Sarah activated her personal tablet and brought up a series of technical specifications. "The Prometheus utilizes a propulsion system based on principles discovered during our analysis of the Centauri artifacts. I believe your civilizations are familiar with those particular relics." The change in atmosphere was immediate and palpable. The Centauri artifacts were objects of almost religious significance to the older galactic civilizations. The Centauri had disappeared over 50,000 years ago, leaving behind only scattered remnants of technology so advanced that even the most sophisticated alien scientists could barely begin to understand how they functioned. "You claim to have reverse-engineered Centauri technology?" Kethvar's voice carried a mix of skepticism and concern. "Many civilizations have attempted such projects. None have succeeded in producing anything more than crude approximations." Sarah smiled for the first time since entering the hangar. "We didn't reverse-engineer their technology. We improved on it." The silence that followed was profound enough that Sarah could hear the subtle hum of the station's life support systems. She watched as the alien delegates exchanged glances, their various methods of communication, creating a background buzz of activity. Through the observation windows, the Prometheus had completed its approach and was now hovering just outside the hangar bay. From this distance, the ship looked almost fragile compared to the massive alien vessels docked at other berths throughout the station. The smallest Valdrani destroyer was easily 10 times the size of the Prometheus, and their capital ships were mobile cities that could house millions of crew members. Prometheus Control. Requesting permission to demonstrate basic maneuverability. "Permission granted, Lieutenant. You have clear space for the next 6 hours." Sarah activated her ship's external cameras and projected the view onto the observation deck's main display screen. The aliens could now see the Prometheus from multiple angles as it began to move away from the station. "Initial acceleration will be minimal," Sarah announced. "Approximately 2 gravities." The ship began to pick up speed, moving away from Kepler Station with what appeared to be standard thruster activity. Nothing about its movement suggested anything unusual or particularly advanced. The alien delegates watched with expressions that ranged from boredom to outright disappointment. "This is your demonstration?" the Zorathi representative asked. "Basic propulsion that any civilized species mastered centuries ago?" Sarah continued to monitor her instruments as the Prometheus reached the predetermined safe distance from the station. "Computer. Initiate quantum cascade sequence. Authorization, Chen 7-7, Alpha. Quantum cascade sequence initiated. All systems nominal." The ship's movement began to change. Instead of the steady acceleration produced by conventional thrusters, the Prometheus started to move with an almost organic fluidity. It curved through space in impossible arcs, changing direction without any visible deceleration or reaction mass. "Interesting," Kethvar admitted. "Some form of gravitic propulsion. My people experimented with similar concepts, but the energy requirements were prohibitive." Sarah's smile widened. "Computer, Prepare for Phase 2 demonstration. Bring the quantum drive to 30% capacity. Quantum drive charging. 30% capacity achieved. What happened next would be talked about in alien military academies for generations to come. The Prometheus simply vanished. One moment it was visible on all sensors, moving through space at a respectable but unremarkable speed. The next moment, every detection system on Kepler station registered empty space where the ship had been. Sensor malfunction. The hegemony representative rumbled, but his voice carried uncertainty rather than conviction. Negative, Sarah replied, checking her own readings. Prometheus is operating normally. She's currently positioned approximately 50,000 kilometers from the station. Impossible, Kethvar said flatly. No vessel can achieve that distance in such a short time without entering hyperspace, and hyperspace jumps require massive energy signatures that would be visible to every sensor within 3 star systems. Sarah activated the ship's external beacon, and suddenly the Prometheus reappeared on all screens and sensors, exactly where she had indicated. The alien delegates stared at the display in stunned silence. The quantum drive doesn't move the ship through space, Sarah explained. It moves space around the ship. The Prometheus never actually left this position. She simply created a localized fold in spacetime that placed her 50,000 kilometers away without crossing the distance between. The implications hit the alien representatives like a physical blow. Faster than light travel without the massive energy signatures of hyperspace jumps. Movement that was essentially instantaneous and left no trail for enemies to follow. A propulsion system that could allow a single small ship to appear anywhere within a star system without warning. You're describing impossible physics, the Zorathi representative said, but their translator carried notes of what Sarah assumed was fear. Space-time manipulation on that scale would require energy outputs equivalent to stellar cores. Prometheus control. Prepare for final demonstration. Bring quantum drive to full capacity. Are you certain, Lieutenant? Full capacity testing is still experimental. Sarah looked at the alien delegates, seeing their expressions shift from skepticism to concern, to something approaching alarm. Confirmed. Control. Full capacity. Quantum drive at 100% capacity. All systems stable. This time, the effect was visible even without instruments. Space around the observation deck seemed to shimmer and bend, as though they were looking through heated air. The stars themselves appeared to stretch and waver, and several of the alien delegates stepped back from the windows instinctively. The Prometheus winked out of existence again, but this time Sarah's voice came through the communication system from an impossible location, currently positioned in the outer asteroid belt, approximately 4 AU from station. Returning to hangar bay now. The ship reappeared directly outside the observation windows, moving into the docking bay with the same fluid grace it had demonstrated throughout the test. As the quantum drive powered down, the strange visual distortions faded, leaving only the familiar view of space and stars. Sarah deactivated her remote connection and turned to face the alien delegates. Their expressions had changed completely. Where before she had seen condescension and boredom, now she saw calculation, respect, and more than a little concern. The demonstration is complete, she announced. The UES Prometheus is now available for detailed technical discussions with qualified representatives. Kethvar was the first to recover his composure. Lieutenant Chen, I believe I may have misjudged both you and your species. This technology represents a fundamental shift in the balance of galactic power. The hegemony representative's voice was carefully controlled when he spoke. How many of these vessels does Earth currently possess? Sarah's smile was polite but revealed nothing. That information would be part of any formal diplomatic discussions between our respective governments. What she didn't say was that the Prometheus was still the only functional quantum drive ship in human hands. The technology was so new and complex that Earth's finest engineers were still struggling to understand how it worked, much less mass-produce it. But the alien delegates didn't need to know that. Not yet. As the group began to file out of the observation deck, Sarah caught fragments of urgent conversations in various alien languages. She didn't need translation to understand the tone. The galaxy's established powers had just realized that the newest species in their community had leapfrogged centuries of technological development in a single breakthrough. Sarah Chen, The rookie pilot they had dismissed as barely out of training had just announced humanity's arrival as a major galactic power. And this was only the beginning. 3 days after the demonstration, Sarah found herself in the most secure conference room aboard Kepler Station, surrounded by alien military advisors who no longer looked at her with contempt. The mood had shifted dramatically since her flight in the Prometheus, and the conversations happening around her carried an urgency that hadn't been present before. Ambassador Kethvar paced back and forth across the room, his crystalline exoskeleton clicking rhythmically against the deck plating. "The hegemony is mobilizing their third fleet," he announced without preamble. 47 heavy cruisers and 12 dreadnoughts, ostensibly for training exercises near the Rigel system. Sarah looked up from the technical specifications she had been reviewing. "That's only 2 jumps from Earth space." "Exactly." The Zorathi representative, who had introduced himself as Hive Speaker Zax then, gestured with 2 of his forearms. "The hegemony believes that human quantum drive technology poses a threat to their territorial expansion plans. They are positioning assets to either negotiate from strength or take decisive action." The gravity of the situation settled over Sarah like a cold blanket. When Earth had agreed to demonstrate the Prometheus, the hope had been to establish humanity as a legitimate member of the galactic community. Instead, they had apparently painted a target on their entire species. "What about your governments?" Sarah asked, looking between Kethvar and Zax then. "Where do the Valdrani Empire and the Zorathi Collective stand on this?" Kethvar stopped pacing and turned his massive head toward her. "My empire is intrigued by the possibilities of an alliance. Quantum drive technology could revolutionize our exploration efforts and provide significant military advantages. However, the Empire Council moves slowly on such matters." Zax then's compound eyes shifted colors as he processed thoughts at superhuman speed. "The collective sees opportunity in partnership with humanity, but also recognizes the danger of the current situation. If the hegemony moves against Earth before formal treaties are established, they will control access to quantum drive technology." Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She was just a pilot, trained to fly ships and follow orders. The political maneuvering happening around her was far beyond her experience, but she was apparently the only human representative who had actually demonstrated the technology these civilizations were so concerned about. "There's something else you need to understand," she said, making a decision that would probably get her court-martialed if things went wrong. "The Prometheus isn't just a single ship with an advanced drive system. The quantum technology is integrated into every aspect of its design." She activated her personal tablet and projected a 3-dimensional image of the ship into the center of the conference table. The aliens leaned forward as the detailed schematic rotated slowly in the air above them. "Human engineers didn't just build a conventional ship and attach a quantum drive," Sarah continued. "They redesigned fundamental principles of Starship construction from the ground up." Kethvar studied the projection with obvious interest. "These hull sections are far too thin to provide adequate protection against conventional weapons. Where are the armor plating and defensive systems?" "That's exactly the point," Sarah said, highlighting specific sections of the ship. "The hull doesn't need thick armor, because the quantum field generators create a localized space-time distortion around the entire vessel. Energy weapons are deflected back into subspace, and kinetic projectiles simply pass through normal space while the ship exists in a slightly different dimensional phase." Zax then made a sound that his translator couldn't interpret, but Sarah assumed it indicated surprise. "You're describing a defensive system that would make conventional weapons completely ineffective." "Not ineffective," Sarah corrected. "Irrelevant. The Prometheus doesn't dodge attacks or absorb damage. Attacks simply never reach the ship because it's not occupying the same space-time coordinates as the weapons targeting it." The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. A ship that couldn't be damaged by conventional weapons could appear anywhere in a star system without warning, and required no massive infrastructure to operate. It was every military strategist's dream and every established power's nightmare. "How many ships like this does Earth possess?" Kethvar asked again, his voice carrying the same careful control the hegemony representative had used days earlier. Sarah hesitated. The honest answer was that Earth had exactly one functional quantum drive ship and no immediate prospect of building more. The technology was so complex that their best scientists were still struggling to understand the theoretical principles involved, much less develop manufacturing processes for the exotic materials required. But honesty might get her entire species conquered or destroyed. Earth's quantum fleet capabilities are classified, she said finally. But I can tell you that the Prometheus represents the baseline design. Our engineers are already working on improved systems. This was technically true. Engineers were indeed working on improvements, even if those improvements mainly consisted of trying to keep the Prometheus from exploding during startup sequences. The quantum drive was stable enough for demonstration flights, but long-duration missions were still considered experimental. Kethvar's mandibles clicked together in what Sarah had learned to recognize as deep thought. Lieutenant Chen, I'm going to share information with you that could be considered state secrets. The Valdrani Empire has been monitoring hegemony communications since your demonstration. They are planning more than a show of force. Sarah felt her stomach drop. What kind of plans? General Thekmore has been given authorization to capture or destroy any human vessels equipped with quantum drive technology. Zax then said, his compound eyes shifting to deep red. The hegemony leadership believes that controlling this technology is worth the risk of war with younger civilizations. They're moving to attack Earth directly? Sarah asked, trying to keep panic out of her voice. Not directly, Kethvar replied. Their plan is more sophisticated. The hegemony will demand that Earth surrender all quantum drive technology and research for galactic security evaluation. When Earth refuses, as they certainly will, hegemony forces will blockade your home system and systematically disable any ships that attempt to leave or enter. Sarah's mind raced through the implications. Earth's conventional fleet was impressive by human standards, but laughably outmatched compared to hegemony dreadnoughts. A single hegemony cruiser could probably defeat Earth's entire space navy, and they were sending 47 of them plus heavy capital ships. How long do we have? 6 days, Zax then said grimly. Maybe 7 if their logistics systems experience delays. After that, the hegemony fleet will be in position to control all access to your star system. Sarah stood up from the conference table, her mind already shifting into tactical mode. I need to return to Earth immediately. My government needs to know what's coming. That would be inadvisable, Kethvar said. Hegemony intelligence operatives are monitoring all traffic leaving this station. If you depart suddenly, especially aboard the Prometheus, they will likely interpret it as a hostile action and move to intercept. Then what do you suggest? Sarah asked, frustration bleeding into her voice. Just sit here while the hegemony positions to destroy my homeworld? Zax then's translator clicked rapidly as he processed thoughts. There may be another option. Both the Valdrani Empire and the Zorathi Collective have defensive treaties with smaller civilizations. If Earth were to formally request protection under those treaties, the hegemony would be forced to negotiate through proper diplomatic channels. That would require Earth to acknowledge junior status in any alliance, Kethvar added. Your species would be protected, but technology sharing agreements would heavily favor the more established civilizations. Sarah felt anger building in her chest. Humanity had just achieved a technological breakthrough that could revolutionize galactic civilization, and their reward was to be forced into subordinate status or face destruction. It was the kind of situation that made her understand why some humans advocated for complete isolation from galactic politics. But isolation wasn't an option anymore. The Prometheus demonstration had made sure of that. There's a third possibility, Sarah said slowly, an idea forming in her mind. What if the hegemony fleet never makes it to Earth? Both aliens stared at her with what she assumed was confusion. Lieutenant Chen, Kethvar said carefully, you cannot be suggesting that a single ship could engage an entire hegemony battle fleet. Even with quantum drive technology, the Prometheus lacks the firepower to threaten capital ships. Sarah's smile was grim. The Prometheus lacks conventional firepower. But quantum drive technology opens up tactical options that conventional ships can't counter. She manipulated the ship schematic on her tablet, highlighting the quantum field generators. What happens if a quantum field intersects with the hull of another ship? Zach's then's compound eyes shifted through several color changes as he processed the implications. The intersecting matter would be displaced into subspace, but that would require incredibly precise positioning and timing, which the quantum drive provides, Sarah continued. The Prometheus can appear at any location within a star system with perfect accuracy. She can materialize inside enemy shields, inside enemy hulls, or in the exact position to cause maximum damage with minimal exposure. Kethvar's mandibles clicked rapidly. You're describing assassination tactics. Single strikes against key targets. I'm describing asymmetric warfare, Sarah corrected. The hegemony is deploying conventional forces using conventional tactics against an opponent they don't understand. Their fleet will be organized in standard formations, with predictable command structures and known vulnerabilities. The alien delegates exchanged glances that Sarah couldn't interpret, but she sensed she had their attention. What would you need to attempt such an operation? Kethvar asked. Intelligence, Sarah said immediately. Fleet positions, command ship identifications, jump schedules, communication protocols. Everything your governments can provide about hegemony military operations. And in return? Zax then asked. Sarah looked around the conference room, seeing the faces of beings whose civilizations had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. They were offering to help Earth, but they wanted something in exchange. Everything in galactic politics had a price. Full technical specifications for quantum drive technology, she said. Complete research data. Manufacturing processes. Theoretical foundations. Everything humanity has learned. The silence that followed was profound. What Sarah was offering was worth more than entire star systems. Technology that could reshape the balance of power across the galaxy. Knowledge that every civilization would kill to possess. You would share this freely? Kethvar asked. With our allies, Sarah replied. The hegemony wants to control quantum technology to maintain their dominance. Earth is willing to share it with civilizations that support peaceful coexistence. Zax then's translator buzzed for several moments before producing words. This proposal would need approval from the highest levels of our governments. Then I suggest you contact them quickly, Sarah said, standing up from the conference table. Because in 6 days, the hegemony fleet will be in position to ensure that quantum drive technology never spreads beyond Earth. And if that happens, none of our civilizations will benefit from what humanity has discovered. As the alien delegates began activating their communication devices, Sarah walked to the observation windows and looked out at the vast starfield beyond Kepler Station. Somewhere, out there, 47 hegemony cruisers were positioning to destroy or conquer her species. In 6 days, the balance of galactic power would be decided. Sarah Chen, the rookie pilot who had been mocked for her youth and inexperience, was about to either save her species or lead them into a war they couldn't possibly win. She thought about the Prometheus, waiting in the station's hangar bay, ready for whatever came next. It was time to show the galaxy what human determination looked like when pushed to the wall. The hegemony Third Fleet hung in space like a constellation of death, their formation spread across several million cubic kilometers near the edge of the Rigel system. From her position aboard the Prometheus, Sarah could see the massive dreadnoughts on her tactical display, their hulls bristling with enough firepower to reduce planets to molten slag. It had taken 4 days to gather the intelligence she needed, and another day to convince Earth Command that her plan wasn't complete suicide. The Valdrani Empire and Zorathi Collective had provided detailed scans of the hegemony fleet, including command ship locations, communication frequencies, and patrol schedules. In return, Earth had transmitted complete technical specifications for quantum drive technology to both civilizations. Sarah hoped her species would survive long enough to regret that decision if it proved to be a mistake. Prometheus to Kepler Station Control, she said into her communication system. Beginning final approach to target zone. Estimate engagement in 30 minutes. Understood, Prometheus. Both Valdrani and Zorathi observer vessels are standing by to monitor the operation. Good hunting, Lieutenant. Oh. Sarah smiled grimly at the well wishes. The observer vessels were positioned far enough away to avoid any crossfire, but close enough to record whatever happened next. If her plan worked, they would witness the first demonstration of quantum warfare tactics. If it failed, they would at least have detailed records of how the Prometheus was destroyed. She activated the quantum drive and felt the familiar sensation of space-time bending around her ship. The stars outside her viewports stretched and twisted as the Prometheus slipped into quantum phase, invisible to conventional sensors and immune to normal space weapons. The first target was the Hegemony command ship, a massive dreadnought designated HNS Dominion. According to Valdrani intelligence, General Thekmore was aboard that vessel, coordinating the fleet's movement toward Earth. Sarah had studied the ship's schematics for hours, memorizing every detail of its layout and defensive systems. Computer, lock quantum coordinates on target Alpha. Materialize position Delta 7. Coordinates locked. Warning. Materialization point is within target vessel's hull structure. Confirmed. Execute quantum jump. The universe folded around the Prometheus, and suddenly Sarah found herself inside the Dominion's main hangar bay. Through her viewports, she could see hegemony fighters and shuttles arranged in neat rows, along with dozens of crew members who were staring at her ship in complete bewilderment. Sarah had approximately 30 seconds before the Dominion's internal security systems would react to her presence. She activated the Prometheus's quantum field at maximum intensity, creating a localized space-time distortion that began tearing through the dreadnought's internal structure. The effect was devastating and immediate. Bulkheads twisted and collapsed as normal matter tried to occupy the same space as quantum-shifted material. Atmosphere rushed out through cracks in reality, and the hangar bay's lights flickered and died as power conduits were severed by dimensional interference. Sarah jumped back into quantum phase before the Dominion's crew could even begin to respond, leaving behind a crippled command ship that was already sending out distress signals to the rest of the fleet. Target Alpha neutralized, she reported to Kepler Station. Proceeding to target Beta. The second target was a heavy cruiser positioned on the fleet's outer perimeter. Sarah materialized directly next to its main reactor housing and activated a quantum pulse that destabilized the ship's power core. She was gone again before the resulting explosion could damage the Prometheus, but the cruiser's destruction sent shockwaves through the entire hegemony formation. By the time Sarah reached her third target, the fleet was in complete chaos. Ships were breaking formation, trying to establish defensive perimeters against an enemy they couldn't see or track. Their weapons fired randomly into empty space, hoping to catch the Prometheus during one of her brief materializations. Sarah had studied hegemony tactics extensively over the past few days, and their response was exactly what she had expected. They were treating her like a conventional threat, trying to use conventional solutions against unconventional warfare. It was like trying to catch smoke with fishing nets. The third target was another cruiser, this one designated as the fleet's communications hub. Sarah materialized inside its command center and activated her ship's quantum field, watching as the cruiser's most important systems were torn apart by dimensional interference. Hegemony officers threw themselves behind control stations as reality bent around them. But there was no shelter from an attack that operated outside normal physics. Target Beta and Gamma neutralized, Sarah reported. Hegemony fleet communications are disrupted. She could see the results of her work on her tactical display. The massive fleet that had been moving in perfect formation toward Earth was now scattered across space, individual ships trying desperately to regroup while their command structure collapsed around them. Several vessels had already begun jumping toward safer positions, abandoning the mission entirely, but Sarah wasn't finished. Her next target was the fleet's logistics vessel, a massive supply ship that carried ammunition, fuel, and spare parts for the entire Third Fleet. Without it, the hegemony ships would be forced to return to their home bases for resupply, effectively ending their threat to Earth for months. Sarah materialized in the supply ship's main cargo bay and found herself surrounded by enough military hardware to equip a small army. Quantum torpedoes, antimatter charges, replacement reactor cores, and thousands of tons of conventional ammunition filled the vast space around her. She activated a low-intensity quantum pulse, just enough to destabilize the containment fields on a few antimatter storage units. The chain reaction that followed was visible from several star systems away as the supply ship disappeared in a brief, artificial sun. Target Delta neutralized, Sarah reported, watching as the explosion's afterglow faded into normal starlight. Hegemony fleet is combat ineffective. What had started as a coordinated invasion force was now a scattered collection of individual ships, many of them damaged, and all of them demoralized. The mighty Third Fleet, pride of the hegemony military, had been reduced to tactical irrelevance by a single small ship and one determined pilot. Sarah's communication system crackled to life with transmissions from multiple sources. The remaining hegemony vessels were broadcasting surrender requests, while Valdrani and Zorathi observer ships were transmitting what she assumed were expressions of amazement and respect. Most importantly, she could hear Earth Defense Force communications celebrating the successful defense of their home system. Prometheus to all vessels, Sarah announced on an open channel. This is Lieutenant Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. The Hegemony Third Fleet's mission has been terminated. Any vessel that wishes to depart this system peacefully will be allowed to do so. Any vessel that continues hostile actions against Earth or her allies will be engaged and destroyed. The response was immediate and universal. Every surviving hegemony ship began charging their hyperspace drives, preparing to jump back to their home territory. Within an hour, the space around Rigel was empty except for debris fields and the observer vessels that had witnessed humanity's first demonstration of quantum warfare. Sarah activated her quantum drive one final time and jumped back to Kepler Station, where she found the hangar bay filled with alien delegates and human officials. As she powered down the Prometheus and opened her ship's hatch, she was greeted by spontaneous applause from beings who had never thought to show such respect to a human pilot. Ambassador Kethvar was the first to approach her as she descended from her ship. "Lieutenant Chen," he said, his voice carrying tones she had never heard from him before, "you have fundamentally altered the balance of power in this galaxy. The hegemony's reputation for military superiority has been shattered, and every civilization will now understand that quantum drive technology represents a new era in warfare." Sarah nodded politely, but she was more interested in the human officials who were pushing through the crowd toward her. Admiral Morrison, commander of Earth's defense forces, reached her first. "Outstanding work, Lieutenant," the admiral said, but his expression was serious. "However, you need to understand that what you've accomplished today has consequences we're only beginning to comprehend." "What kind of consequences, sir?" "Every major civilization in the galaxy now knows that Earth possesses technology that can neutralize their military advantages," Morrison explained. "Some will want to ally with us. Others will want to destroy us before we become too powerful. And still others will try to steal our technology for themselves." Sarah looked around at the alien faces surrounding her, seeing expressions that ranged from admiration to calculation to barely concealed fear. The rookie pilot, who had been mocked for her youth and inexperience, had just announced humanity's emergence as a galactic superpower, but she was beginning to understand that power came with prices she hadn't anticipated. "The Valdrani Empire wishes to propose a formal military alliance," Kethvar announced. "Our combined fleets could provide security for quantum drive development, while Earth shares the technology with proven allies. The Zorathi Collective offers similar partnership opportunities," Zax then added. "Our manufacturing capabilities could accelerate quantum drive production, allowing both our civilizations to benefit from this breakthrough." Sarah listened to the various offers and proposals being made around her, but her attention was focused on a message that was coming through her personal communication device. It was from Earth, marked with the highest security classifications and signed by the President himself. The message was brief but clear. "Lieutenant Chen, your actions today have secured Earth's survival and established humanity as a major galactic power. However, intelligence reports indicate that several civilizations are already mobilizing assets to capture or destroy quantum drive technology. You are hereby promoted to commander and given authority to negotiate preliminary agreements with potential allies. The future of our species may depend on your decisions over the next few days." Sarah looked up from her communication device to find dozens of alien representatives watching her with expressions of hope, fear, and desperate ambition. The rookie pilot had become humanity's primary diplomatic representative in a galaxy where technology was power, and power determined survival. She thought about the Prometheus, still warm from its quantum drive operations, and about the technical specifications that Earth had already shared with the Valdrani Empire and Zorathi Collective. Humanity had chosen to trust their allies rather than try to hoard quantum technology for themselves, and that decision had already begun paying dividends. But Sarah also understood that the real test was just beginning. The hegemony fleet had been defeated, but the hegemony itself remained a major galactic power, with thousands of ships and a grudge against the species that had humiliated their finest military force. Other civilizations would be making their own calculations about how to respond to humanity's sudden emergence as a technological superpower. The rookie pilot who had been mocked for her inexperience was about to discover that winning a battle was often easier than managing the consequences of victory. But as she looked around at the mixture of human and alien faces watching her every move, Sarah Chen smiled. Humanity had demanded respect from the galaxy, and after today, they had certainly earned it. Whatever challenges lay ahead, her species would face them as equals rather than subjects. And that, she thought, was worth any price they might have to pay. The young pilot had proven that humans belonged among the stars, and the galaxy would never be the same.